Hey everybody, I have Dr. Alexa Altman back here with me. If you haven't watched our video we did previously, we talked about the difference between shame and guilt, toxic and healthy shame, but today we're here to talk about shame resilience. So in our last video together, we talked about the difference between toxic shame and healthy shame. So if someone does have toxic shame in their life, how do they even know that it's toxic, or how do they move from that?
Right. I think it's such a great point because toxic shame, as we said in the previous video, it becomes almost like an identity. It's like the clothes you wear. It doesn't feel like it's a state. It feels like it's just who I am, right? So what does shame look like? First thing to build shame resilience is to identify it, recognition. And shame can look like cognitively, like mentally. It looks like I'm not good enough, I'm flawed, there's something wrong with me. And let me just say, as a human being, we all vacillate between those states.
Yeah, it's almost like part of that negative self-talk that we all have at different points in our life, especially if we're trying something new or different.
Right.
But if someone has a lot of toxic shame in their life, would this be what they operate out of most of the time?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And then often spend a lot of energy defending against it, which is I'm going to shame other people, or I'm going to withdraw and kind of go into my shame hole. Right? Or I'm going to deny or ignore it in some way.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like all our defense mechanisms come out.
Also, it's important to say the shame state, what it feels like in the body, that's another part. Sometimes people don't have the thoughts, they just feel it in their body.
Yeah, so, almost like when trauma we talked about body memories, where you can just feel it, but you don't even have an actual memory. Maybe it's repressed at that point, but you still experience. Is this kind of similar? You just act out bodily?
Bodily, which feels like solar plexus, like in the chest, you feel like tight, you can't breathe. Oftentimes with shame, because there's so much cortisol, brain is super foggy.
Oh, interesting.
So you can't put thoughts together, which makes you feel even more inadequate.
Yeah, and then builds on the shame. It's like snowballing.
Snowball. And it's the seed of addiction, because then we're trying to avoid and soothe and diminish all of that.
Yeah, like numb out.
Yeah. Right. So in building shame resilience, it's important to know what those indicators are. And I say writing a story, a narrative. So part of shame recovery is I need to write out my shame story.
Yeah.
And that is, what does shame look like? What does it smell like? What does it taste like? Draw a picture of it, because in order to understand shame, we have to externalize it and create some story. Even if you don't know what created it in your life, often early life experiences that we talked about in the previous video. But it's important to know that this was something that was handed down to you. Oftentimes toxic shame is transgenerational. You see lots of generations of shame.
Well, yeah, because if our defense mechanisms are to shame others, or to ignore, or, you can see how it can build, or even addicts. Like we know that if we have a parent or a close family member who's an addict, we're more predisposed to act out in that behavior as well, because we're like learning our coping mechanisms.
Exactly. And so Brené Brown talks a lot about what's a hostile environment to shame, and I love how she says that, is what's hostile to shame is empathy, because shame survives on secrecy, judgment, and darkness. So we have to bring shame into the light. So on top of building a shame narrative story is to tell somebody.
Yeah, and have empathy for your own shame and your own experience.
Yeah.
So if someone struggled to write a narrative, meaning like in a story, could they just talk about what the shame has been experienced for them, like what the experience is? Does that make sense?
Yeah, because it's in a way you're starting to build a little bit of structure.
Okay, so almost like we're starting to shine the light a little to see, okay, it looks like it's round, okay, it's dark, or it's light, or it's whatever. We're like describing it, and then maybe as we get more into it, we could like write the narrative of when it started and how we felt and all of that.
I love that, because in a way it's like, in the dark when you're a little kid, how the corner of the room, it looks like there's a monster, and then you turn the light on and you're like, oh, that's my dirty clothes from the day.
Yeah, totally.
And so I think in a way it is the beginning of that light, and then realizing that the monster only lives in the dark. But one important thing, if you're going to shine the light on something and you're going to tell somebody, you have to be very wise about who you tell.
Yes, be very picky.
Looking for someone who's non-judgmental, empathic, can give you proper kind of attention, right? Who's willing, which could be a therapist or
I was going to say, it could be a therapist. It sounds
therapist.
like a lot of therapists. But it could also be like a really close friend or family member, someone who you've entrusted with your emotions and your experience for a long time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because I could see that when we finally, if we're looking, so we're going back to Brené Brown's like description, if we're trying to find the things that shame can't live in, essentially, then we need to find the empathy, and we need to go searching for the light and things like that, because if we go and find the wrong person, we could just build the shame story. Like, we're writing a whole other chapter, essentially.
Yeah, again, I think it's a great point. I think it's a great point that you make. And I think one thing that happens when you're ready to take on shame is that you're really saying, I'm willing to be courageous. Because you have to be vulnerable and authentic and say, this is kind of like, it's almost like showing somebody your guts, right? You're like, this is something that I have to show you that I feel like is going to be super icky. Yeah. And you're not going to love me because I wasn't deeply loved at one time. And I have to risk maybe that happening again.
Yeah, and that can be super scary.
I just feel scared talking about it.
I know. I'm like, ooh. Yeah. Because it is, but I feel like the truth is that with practice, everything gets better. Right. And I know I always say, like, it's a process, not perfection. We're slowly working through, but I think with this in particular, starting slow and going at your own pace and being careful and selective and then finding that person, and then it's not like all or nothing, like we have to verbally vomit all of our guts out, right? We can start slow with like, you know, I used to have this hard time and I still feel some of that, and like starting with just the experiences we have in the current before we can take it back. And
I'd be interested though, because I'm curious what people's shame stories are, at least the parts in your community of people who are willing to share a little bit, because I think what we see is we all have them.
That's the truth. And that's why we even feel like, ooh, because everybody has it. So leave in the comments if you feel able, if you feel courageous enough, if you feel safe enough, sharing a little bit about your shame story.
The thing is with shame, it's sticky. What I mean is that we develop often shame early in life, like pre-verbally. And so it can be as quickly as like a feeling that overcomes me. And that's often what it is. And I just feel so bad. Yeah. Right? I feel so bad, and I wouldn't dare talk about it because I don't even know like quite why I feel so bad.
Yeah. And so just to take it like a little further, so if someone is writing, so we're going to start identifying our shame. We have our narrative that we're slowly putting together, maybe building with a therapist or a friend. From there, because for me conceptually, I'm like, so how would I maybe tell Sean my shame story? What does that really look like? Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. So it could look like something if you know what triggered it. Like my boss yelled at me, or my boss gave me a review, and he said 30 things that I did well, but one thing that I did awful.
And we focus on that awful.
Right. Awful. And I feel like I'm incompetent, I feel like I'm a loser, and I feel like I'm going to lose my job. And so that's part of it, is sharing like kind of those inner secrets.
The conversation we have with ourselves, like saying it out loud.
And the empathic listener is, I hear you, I love you, no matter what happens, I'm here. And it's like, I get it. We all go through that, and I'm here. I'm not going to say your experience is wrong or bad or you shouldn't feel that way. You know, I understand what happened. And then I think this is where the magic happens. It's then deconstructing the story. Let's deconstruct it all. Let's figure out exactly what led from your boss saying you did one wrong thing to you feeling like you're the worst employee.
Yeah, where's that tie? Yeah. Because essentially then what we're doing, just to give you a little like therapist insight, is we're taking it from the present to the past, because what happened in the present, this is something that I always keep in mind myself, is when my reaction is larger or more emotional than I really think the actual thing that happened warranted, meaning I'm overreacting for like that's not a nice thing to say, but I'm saying this to myself. Sometimes I overreact.
It's like overdetermined.
Exactly. Yeah. And so when I know that that's happened, it's really helpful for me then to think, what is it that I'm really upset about? Or what was it that really happened? Because this is way more than I should be upset. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we're doing, is first talking about the story and what happened now, and then untangling why it was such a trigger.
And something I really like, you know, when you walk into your house and you're like, okay, so my keys and my wallet go on this one table so I never lose them, and that way I like can organize. And our here at the campus, that part that's involved with memory, loves when there's like a place for something. So I have like a shame notebook, right? So you write down your shame story, your shame picture. This is what it smells like. This is what it tastes like. This is what it looks like. This is who I talk about it with when I'm in it. Because the truth is, when you're in shame and there's all that cortisol, you forget. It's like where you forgot to put your wallet. You forget.
Because it's foggy.
It's foggy. Right.
So unless we write it down, we can forget.
That's right.
And then as we continue to tell our story and we continue to talk about it, write it out, is that how we build the resiliency? Like in our old videos we did, if you haven't watched those, I'll link those in the description as well. But we talk about resiliency and like it's like a muscle.
Yeah.
And we're building it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the vulnerability authenticity muscle.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't have it together right now, and I just need to share with you how I don't have it together right now, and we don't do that a lot.
No, and knowing that's also okay.
Yeah.
Because most people feel like that most of the time.
Right, that it's not a weakness.
No.
This is actually a strength.
Yeah.
Yeah. So building the resilience is really redefining that vulnerability as a strength.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is just how we talk about it to ourselves and to others, and embracing the vulnerability and being okay with like authentic selves.
Yeah, and changing the landscape of mental health.
Yeah, totally.
Which you would know a little bit about. And so I think in a way, changing the landscape of mental health, which is saying, I am struggling, this is really hard for me, I don't have it together. Women tend to feel like they have it all together all the time, and men feel like I can't be weak.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, well, actually, if our resilience depends on that level of vulnerability, we might be working the wrong muscle.
Yeah, we might actually be fighting against ourselves.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Fascinating. So like Alexa said, if you have a shame story that you feel safe enough in our community to share, leave it in the comments. Or if you have a way that you express your shame story or something that's helped prompt you, let us know, because we all learn together. And I want to give you a huge thank you for coming by and sharing all of your knowledge. I hope you found this helpful. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe, because I put out videos twice a week and you don't want to miss them. And we will see you next time. Bye.